I finally began to really do civil rights as a vocation when Ed Brooke was elected Attorney General, and he had a place in his staff for lawyers working on civil rights. He knew what I wanted to do because he and I had worked together in the NAACP and in organizations, and he knew of my passion for civil rights. And he knew I wasn't happy doing anything else. And so he appointed me as an Assistant Attorney General in the Civil Rights Division. And then I went to the federal government, and I worked in fair housing at HUD, and then came back and I worked at the Mass Housing Finance Agency. In the Mass Housing Finance Agencies, those who wanted to do business with us had to do them according to the civil rights laws. They had to be inclusive. They had to hire inclusively. They had to rent their properties inclusively. So my role was to draft the programs for them, because while I maintain that most people wanted to do the right thing, I think in this area they just didn't know what to do. So they needed somebody to lead them. When owners set out to hire managers, to hire housing managers, they never looked to the minority communities for people. And when I would ask them, who they had on their staff and how many of people they had on their staff of different types, they'd come back and they'd say, well, we can't find any. So I went to my director and I said, I think I'm going about this the wrong way. Maybe we ought to start some training programs and to train some people so that they can no longer say they can't find anybody. They can come to our program. And it was my job to see to it that all of this activity took place, taking into consideration the needs of everybody. And I really enjoyed seeing them come alive and then volunteer and plan it themselves, come into my office with a plan that they have done, not that I had to do for them. I spent 12 years as a member of the National Board of the YWCA of the USA. And at the end of the 12 years, I was elected president. And I spent 6 years as president of the National Board of the YWCA. In that capacity, I did quite a bit of traveling because we are the largest YWCA in the world. I would sometimes do workshops on racial justice. I'd sometimes do them on leadership, on women's leadership, and the kinds of issues that the YWCA was working on, that they may want somebody from the United States to come and give them. Sometimes it wasn't just information, but they wanted somebody to give them the aspiration and the desire for them to move up. But any way that we, as this YWCA, could help YWCAs in another country, we did that. And we did it with youth, too. We sent many young women who never thought they'd ever get out of the country, There they were sitting over there in Botswana. As I like to say, I did a lot for them, but they certainly did a lot for me. Because they sent me places I never would have gone. I met people that I never would have met, wonderful, wonderful women around the world that are doing all sorts of wonderful things. And it was a joy. I think the Mass Commission Against Discrimination was probably the most rewarding. And that was because the laws had just been passed. And those of us who were enforcing them at the time had to figure out how to enforce them. And moving the agency from a social work type of view to an enforcement view, because that's what it was up until then. You know, we're going to make everybody good, and so we're going to do everything to make everybody good. Well, you know, they have to obey the laws, and so you can't always make everybody good. So when I went in, they didn't have lawyers. I had been doing the legal work, and I knew they needed it. I really needed some lawyers. Once we built a good legal staff, we could make the agency into an enforcement agency. And so that was very rewarding. And probably the highest of my work. My professional goals was to get rid of discrimination and segregation. That's why I went to law school. So that was my goal, to get rid of that, rid of discrimination and segregation in all areas of operation. And that's what I set out to do. And I couldn't conquer them all, but I think I put a dent in quite a few. I would do it all over again. So there are a lot of new fields. I mean, I'm running into lawyers all the time when they tell me what they're doing, I'm saying, oh my, I didn't know lawyers were doing those things. There are laws to take care of a lot of issues that there weren't laws to take care of then. For instance, the country wasn't dealing a lot with environmental issues. It is now. The country wasn't dealing a lot with problems in health care. And of course, it is now. And there are a lot of opportunities for lawyers, you know, in all of these fields. So those are issues that are still being worked on by lawyers. But it's wonderful to find someone who wants to struggle with it. And of course, that's what most people don't know, that lawyers struggle a lot with these issues before we come up with a solution. It's not in the law book, you know. I mean, you've got to figure out how to do it, what kind of writ to bring, what kind of suit to bring, what kind of, you know, it's tough work. I would tell them not to get settled in on what they want to do with their law. Wait until they've been through, you know, some of the courses, some of the years, before they decide what it is they want to do. Because they probably are going to change their mind several times. They may have several careers before they're over. They have to believe in themselves and not be disturbed or be put off because they're not successful all the time. Because it's not always their fault. They're not making the decisions. Somebody else is. And their role is to try to persuade that so that the decision comes their way. But and to step back and come again. You know, as Thurgood Marshall used to say, if the judge doesn't buy one argument, you give them another one.